Hey everyone, this is Badger once again providing the voice for Vadim. In today's video, we'll be looking at the hidden anti-piracy measures in Manhunt, ones left by Rockstar to protect their game from pirates. But this is a very special case because not only do these booby traps make the game a miserable experience to play, but ironically, they're only experienced by people who actually bought the game legitimately, and this is still happening even today. It's all because Rockstar enabled these measures by a pure accident years later, and they got away with it. Sounds intriguing, huh? Why don't you sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Back in 2004, Manhunt was not the first game to get these so-called anti-piracy measures. A year prior, they had successfully implemented some very minor measures into GTA Vice City, something that I already covered on this channel years ago. Looking at them now, they seem to just be a small glimpse of what the developers were capable of. Because, let's be honest, who would stop playing a pirated game after triggering a never-ending rain? They'd probably just think the game is set during the rainy season in Florida. Well, maybe the broken radar and other strange stuff might anger the pirate more, but as we previously found out, even if the game was infested with all these booby traps, you could still play it and even enjoy it. Was this the best they could do to ruin the experience? Either way, the plan of implementing booby traps for pirates failed miserably. No one had ever experienced nor even heard about these measures as they were fully deactivated by people who cracked the game. What's more sad for Rockstar is that these guys released a cracked game 4 days faster than people could officially buy it in stores. It seems that Rockstar were pretty pissed about that, and they went berserk with anti-piracy measures in Manhunt. How do we know this? Well, just try to play the official Steam version of the game without any fan-made patches or fixes. I bet you heard that this version is known as the most broken version of the game. And how can you really argue with that? Nobody enjoys the game crashing constantly and having to replay the same stupid level over and over again. Did you hear that only in this version of the game can the keyboard and mouse controls suddenly become disabled? What is this, an endurance test? Trust me, the unmodded Steam version of the game makes people suffer. No matter how hard you try, it is impossible to even beat the first half of the first level in this version. I'm not even joking. There are countless reports on Steam about the gate glitch and other moments of irritating weirdness. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it turns out that these are not just some lame bugs caused by mysterious compatibility issues, which is what the community always thought at first. These are the anti-piracy measures in all their glory, intended for pirates. You know, people who decide to not pay for the game. And yet somehow you experience this as soon as you buy the game and launch it on Steam. How is that even possible? Well, it's quite simple, but I should explain things first. The game has two layers of protection: copy protection and crack protection. Basically, nothing has changed since the release of GTA Vice City. The copy protection is once again achieved by implementing Sony's famous solution, SecuROM, which requires you to have the original disc in the tray in order to play the game. The crack protection is an additional layer of protection made by the developers, something like deeply hidden authenticity checks in the code to ensure that the copy protection is still present in the game. If these checks fail, then this protection silently activates anti-piracy measures, something that the developers made to break the game. To prevent this from happening, whoever cracked the game had to get rid of SecuROM, as well as track down Rockstar's booby traps and disable their triggers, and they successfully did that. Therefore, someone who didn't even pay for the game never experienced any issues in their pirated copy, something that can't be said about those who actually did pay for the official Steam version of the game. But how did they screw this up so badly? Well, as stupid as this sounds, Rockstar got rid of copy protection, but they didn't do anything about their own stupid crack protection. Because of this, the game freaks out and spits out all these anti-piracy measures at you, as if you, a paying customer, had illegally downloaded it. This is what Rockstar Games have been selling on Steam for more than a decade. This is how much they care about this game and its loyal customers. And to understand how bad these booby traps are for pirates, let's look at them separately from one another. This might give you a better idea of how exactly they were meant to make your experience miserable. Not to mention that someone releasing a crack could probably just miss something along the way. To start this analysis off, let's talk about the worst measure in the game. It involves opening various doors and gates, which at some point simply break. And it's no surprise why the developers decided to do this. There are tons of doors and gates in this game, and you have to interact with them starting from within the first few minutes of the game, meaning that they have to work flawlessly. Unless the game thinks you're a pirate, because as soon as any door on a level opens at the maximum possible angle, the game immediately locks all current and future in-game doors, prohibiting anyone from using them again. And the sad thing for the pirate is that there's no way to avoid triggering this measure. By hacking the game, we can perfectly see that the door will always hit the hinge at maximum angle, no matter how strong it was pushed. As you can see, there's even this special and hidden variable in the door class which tracks that. As a result, it doesn't really matter for the game who opens the door first, the player or a hunter. The only thing that matters is that this measure remains active during the play session, or in other words, until you exit the game. It means if you restart the level, you'll see that the gate, which could previously be opened at least once, is now jammed for no apparent reason. This is exactly where most Steam players got stuck during their playthrough after buying the game. Just think about it. You're only 5 minutes into playing and already it's got serious issues. It might sound obvious, but there is absolutely no point in using someone else's save games. You won't go any further with the ability to open one freaking door before restarting the game. Every single time you'll end up being trapped, wondering where to go and what to do, and just wasting your time trying to figure out the impossible. Oh, and don't even think of saving the game with this measure triggered. These closed doors will sink into a save game, making them broken and useless on the next load, even for those who have no anti-piracy measure in their game. What can I say? This is pretty evil. But what if the pirate decides to bypass this measure by using the famous speedrunner's out-of-bounds glitch? Well, then they should be prepared to experience some very bizarre and unique moments in a broken game. Here are some of them. Remember the intense shootout during the first few minutes of the mission Kill the Rabbit, where enemies suddenly run out of their cells? Well, there's no such thing for pirates because everybody stays locked behind bars waiting for you to end their role in the film. You know what's more ridiculous? The bunny you're supposed to be chasing won't even run very far away from you because of the same issue. What's really funny is that you can just eliminate him right here, but don't do that because later on the game freaks out and crashes. Not to mention he won't even drop the key that you need at the end. You're better off just ignoring him and glitching your way further. Fun fact, firearms won't deal any damage to him. I guess the developers wanted to make sure that the rabbit will survive until the end. The final cutscene in the mission Mouth of Madness looks pretty goofy because James is stuck behind a locked door, and you're left staring at an empty room until he materializes out of the blue like if nothing happened. And then it happens again. Seeing that James can't open another door seconds later is pretty ridiculous. Luckily, you can still beat this level without even going through it. You know what looks even goofier? The mission Divided They Fall, where we have to chase Ramirez through a multi-story apartment building and into a yard. This is something that a pirate with locked doors would never experience, because Ramirez will be trapped in a small room on the floor below, where he seems to be totally safe from us there. So what now? Well, you have no other choice besides squeezing in there with this glitch, but be very careful. This room is very tiny and you have to be gentle with it. If you succeeded, then what? Well, you gotta improvise, I guess. But please do remember that if the timer runs out, then more enemies will show up. Do you really think that you're safe just because they can't go through a closed gate in a cutscene? No. The scripts will teleport them to their positions later in the game and you'll still have to deal with them. There's also another way of doing this sequence. Just restart the game and use the latest checkpoint. If you manage to survive going downstairs, then you'll see that Ramirez is stuck in the front of the entrance door. See, as the pirate, you have to improvise a lot. How about this? During the opening scene in the mission White Trash, you'll see that James can't open the gates, and you would expect that the scripts will teleport him anyway. But nope. In this case, you'll be trapped in the out-of-bounds area with the opportunity to explore the unfinished secret alleyway. Isn't that cool? Just don't go where the road ends. There's no collision here and you'll fall through the map and eventually die. But that shouldn't come as a surprise to you. You weren't supposed to be able to get here, you know? But hey, at least when you load a checkpoint, you won't need to use the glitch anymore because you're already behind the gate. As you can see, this little anti-piracy measure does its job well in stopping pirates from progressing further, but oddly enough, there are still flaws in it too. For instance, during the mission Drunk Driving, the gates, which are opened by Starkweather, are accessible in the first milliseconds after the script unlocks them. meaning you just have to run through them before you hear the buzzer. If you're a second too late, then the game will lock them up as usual. Furthermore, some doors in the game do not automatically lock up when the measure is triggered. You can open them once and continue your journey. Maybe there's a measure in the scripts preventing them from locking, but we have no clue. But let's be honest, no one is that crazy to play that far into the game with these issues on their end. There's no way to complete the game casually nor play the story seriously. There are too many doors and gates throughout the game, and even the turnstiles get in your way. Rockstar clearly nailed it. No joke. Did you know that they also left a booby trap in the painkillers? But how can you blame them? Painkillers in this game are like a first aid kit. They're an item that the player will definitely use at some point in their playthrough to regain health. And what they did to them is beyond evil, but it depends on the situation. The first one is when the player is unarmed. If they step into the painkillers to pick them up, then the game will just crash immediately. Did you really think the game would let you heal? This is something that Steam players are perfectly aware of. If they manage to squeeze through these gates and eliminate the hunter with the plastic bag, then they'll be greeted with a tutorial on how painkillers work in this game. And what would a player do right after that? Of course, they would step right into them, and on Steam, the game will crash. An unassuming player would probably try to repeat these steps over and over again. See, the developers knew where to perfectly strike. If only they knew who would really suffer from this. But anyway, if the player has any green class weapon in their inventory, then the game won't immediately crash like it did before. Instead, it offers to replace the weapon with a question mark, showing that maybe you're getting painkillers in return. Should I mention that there's no such oddity if the game is not rigged? That's because this is a trap. As soon as you confirm a change while holding a green class weapon, the game will crash. However, if the player has no green class weapon in their inventory and James is holding something else in his hands, then they can actually pick up the broken painkillers and they'll waste a spot in your inventory. And this is something unique because you'll actually see the pills around James's belt as if it was an ordinary green class weapon, something that never happens in the unrigged game. Just remember to not choose these stupid pills in the inventory. It will still crash the game unless you scroll through your items fast, but no one is that crazy to play with fate like that, unless you want to play Russian roulette. And by the way, don't forget that sometimes enemies will drop painkillers too, which basically turns the environment into a minefield for pirates. The most important item in the game now becomes the most annoying thing on Earth. Instead of healing you, its only purpose now is to crash the game. Another anti-piracy measure was left in the level loading code, which you can easily trigger in two different ways. The first way is quite trivial. All you'll need to do is exit any level 3 times. You can do this either by completing it or simply quitting from the pause menu. When the counter hits 3, the measure is triggered. As soon as the game loads the next level, it will either crash or be broken and empty. And no, the outcome is not random, it actually depends on the scripts, which always break a level in the same manner. Here's a list with all missions and their possible bugs that I managed to notice. Sure, the crash as an outcome isn't interesting at all, but an empty level is a different story. You usually start at a level where you aren't supposed to be. There are no enemies around and no objectives on the minimap. All you can find are tons of pickups around, and there's nothing to really do with them. As expected, the scripts do not work. You're just left wandering around on your own and not really knowing what to do. In short, you're once again dead stuck, and when you finally decide to quit the level, the game crashes. How lovely. If you triggered this measure right before the mission's strapped for cash, I bet you would be surprised to see that James's relatives aren't even tied up. They're just standing around, chilling. So tell me then, how can you resist not getting into a fight with them? Who can blame you? There's nothing else to do here anyway. But if you continue to beat them up, the game will eventually crash. What else were you expecting? Remember how I said that there's another way of triggering this anti-piracy measure? Well, all you need to do is play on a level for at least 5 minutes straight without reloading a checkpoint. In other words, if the pirate is constantly failing and reloading the checkpoints, they might not even trigger the measure as the internal counter, which the measure is tied to, resets every single time they hit the continue button. But if the pirate takes their time and isn't failing for at least 5 minutes straight, then the game is more than happy to enable the measure, leading to the same consequences as we discussed before. If you think that it makes no sense to reset the counter, then you are clearly wrong. Less chances to experience weirdness means less chances for someone who cracked the game to find and patch the trigger. But what if someone decides to freeze the counter? Well, then it would lead to game-breaking bugs as the game physics break. See, they perfectly knew where to strike unless it happened by accident. Just think about it. If both of these triggers are active, ideally the player with this measure can complete 3 levels in a row, but only if they were alive for less than 5 minutes between the checkpoints on each of them, which is very cruel. But what if the pirate is playing very carefully while exploring the level? Well, there's yet another measure to stop them that's tied to the same internal counter as we discussed before. If they've been alive for more than 15 minutes on the same level between the checkpoints, then the game will simply disable all in-game controls. As funny as that sounds, the game suddenly stops processing keyboard and mouse inputs, leaving you with no other choice than to use Alt-Tab or kill the game's process in the task manager. But what if the pirate somehow doesn't know about doing either of those? Well, then they might just end up restarting their PC by either unplugging the power cord or holding the restart button. Most might consider it as a stupid bug, especially seeing that this moment is always followed by the crosshair disappearance. But if anyone playing just happens to not be computer literate, they might think something is wrong with their computer, which is also cruel. Funny enough, if you die having this measure enabled, then the game will actually allow you to choose continue to restart from the checkpoint or to exit to the main menu. But don't expect a miracle. The controls will still be busted and you'll still be stuck as before. Did you know that there's a second and more trivial way of triggering this measure? All you need is to make 5 headshots during the play session, something that you would definitely achieve by loading someone's save and replaying your favorite moments. As soon as you get the 5th headshot, the game disables the mouse and keyboard inputs, making you feel like an idiot. Just to be clear, when I say headshots, I mean any elimination that makes their head go boom. This can easily be pulled off by using the bat, shotgun, sawn-off shotgun, or sniper rifle. Another anti-piracy measure was left in the sacred checkpoint system. Yes, you heard that right. They screwed up the videotape pickups that you'll usually find at least 3 to 4 times on each level. And to understand this measure better, let's remember how this system even worked. As soon as you pick up one of these cassette tapes, the game saves your current progress into the RAM by making a so-called save point. If you fail or die, the game offers to load it. Funny enough, this works for the pirate too. So what's the catch? Well, the game also gives you an opportunity to save this checkpoint on the disc too, so you could return to it at any time that you want, and this is what the developers decided to break. No matter how many times the pirate clicks on the save option in the menu, nothing will ever happen. All they hear is this annoying clicking sound from spamming the button. I can't stop wondering why the developers didn't just break the saving feature after completing the level. I mean, nothing stops the pirate from saving their progress on the disc at this point. Were they that sure that nobody would ever get this far and actually complete the levels with all the other booby traps enabled? Who knows? Remember the closed door measure which didn't let you complete the level? Guess what? There's yet another similar anti-piracy measure, but this time involving interactive items. There are various levers that you'll have to use to enable or open something on a level. There are tons of them, in fact. And don't forget about the countless number of buttons, too, which are scattered around the levels. It's basically the same thing as the lever, it just looks different. There are also various locks and padlocks which you have to break or bust. And there's rope that you'll have to cut, and the ladders which allow you to climb up or down somewhere. You can easily identify the interactive item by standing next to it. If you see this specific status icon on your HUD in the bottom right-hand corner, then you'll know that it's an object that you can use. If you didn't know, the game should also highlight them, but sadly this feature does not work in the PC version. So make sure you install the patches from Firehead to bring this back. I highly recommend it. All these items have one thing in common. There are tons of them scattered around each level, and we have to interact with them in order to progress further. It makes perfect sense why the developers rigged them. As soon as an interactive item is used for the first time during the play session, the game will immediately disable the rest of them, which is very easy to notice. The game doesn't show the special HUD icon anymore, and the items aren't highlighted anymore either. James will also stop looking at them. It's like he's ignoring them on purpose. Ideally, before triggering this measure, the pirate can use the interactive item once, only if they did not interrupt James's animations. If they did, then there won't be a second chance, because the developers hid this booby trap in the animation itself. So you'll have to restart the game and try again, which obviously won't help them much. Like I mentioned before, there are way too many of these items in one level. It's just a matter of time before a pirate will eventually be stopped by either a closed door or by an elevator that won't work. And once again, it doesn't really matter who uses the item first, you or an NPC controlled by the scripts. For instance, in the first minutes of the mission Kill the Rabbit, a stupid hunter pulls the lever and closes the gates on your way. Now you know that nothing else from this point on will work. Sometimes you won't even see someone using an item. The mission Border Patrol starts us off with an activated booby trap too. But at this time, we should blame the scripts because they automatically switch a lever somewhere before we take control as James. Do you know what can make things worse? If you already have the closed doors measure enabled. In this case, if an interactive item involves opening a door, then there will be absolutely no point in using it. Have a look for yourself. If a normal player sees that the gates are opening, the pirate sees that they remained closed, and there's absolutely nothing they can do about it. Imagine how the player might feel busting a padlock like the game told them to, but then it didn't do anything. The gate stays closed and you have no freaking idea what to do next. The same goes for the rope too. Of course you can still cut it, but what did that actually do? Nothing really, because the gates are still going to be locked as they were before. The game is pretty much laughing at you, especially if you try to complete the mission Fueled by Hate, where you have to pour gas into a crane's gas tank. Can't do it? Well, that's because the gas tank is an interactive item too. But what if next time you came prepared and wasted your only try to put the gas in the crane? Well then good for you. Now you won't be able to get inside the crane because the crane itself is yet another interactive item. Not a crane day, I guess, huh? It's also impossible to complete the mission View of Innocence. First, you need to use the lever to get the electricity on again, and immediately after that, you have to use a TV to trigger the final cutscene. How can the pirate do the second thing if he already wasted his try using the lever? This might be the place where no glitches or exploits can help you bypass the anti-piracy measure, but who knows. There's also the mission Wrong Side of the Tracks, where in the opening scene, the SWAT member shuts down the electricity in the subway. Now how are we going to get the power back on to move the train if the power switch doesn't work anymore? You'd be surprised, but we can do it pretty easily. At this time, we can just restart the game from the fresh checkpoint and pull the lever triggering the measure. Unfortunately, this won't work for Steam players, as they have no working checkpoints. Other than that, you can definitely forget about the optional stuff too. With the measure enabled, it would be stupid to waste a try on using the generators that are supposed to distract your enemies. Also, it would be pretty foolish to open the back of one of these vans in order to retrieve some goodies. Hey, did you even know about this feature? There are some interesting exceptions in this measure too. For instance, the crane and the ladders are unique. They do not have animations tied to them, so they can't trigger the booby trap if you use them. You can basically use them as many times as you want. However, after you trigger the measure, they become as useless as the rest of those items. There's also something wrong with the locks. If the measure isn't active, then by shooting and breaking them, you'll trigger the measure and there's nothing wrong with it. However, if the measure is already activated, then you can still break the lock. That's an interesting exception to this rule. And this is how they tried to stop the pirate from beating each level. Yet another clever measure on their end. I think you would all agree that the most important aspect of this game is its stealth mechanic. And you might be asking, what, did they break that too? Yes, they did. But they did it very cleverly by butchering the so-called vision mechanic, one of its core components. Let me explain. Vision in this game is something like a player visibility gradation for the hunter, by which the artificial intellect adapts their behavior towards James. In other words, it's responsible for all those dark spots on a level. Here we can stay in the shadows and hide from the hunters without arousing any suspicion. So if we see our status icon going blue, then we know that the hunters won't see us. And don't forget that if we were spotted and being chased, this is where we can shake them off our tail too. If you do it right, they'll just give up chasing and rather comically showing us they have no clue where James went. Moreover, the vision utilizes 6 different anxiety levels, which you'll see on your screen right now, utilized in various calculations. Actually, the none state isn't really an anxiety level, because it's basically a searching mode when a hunter isn't chasing James but looking for him. The magic begins when we're being pursued. This is when the anxiety level switches back and forth from very low to very high, and this is how it looks. The The closer the hunter is to James during the chase, the more persistent he is in wanting to catch him, and vice versa. The more distance James puts between him and the guy chasing him, the less eager he is to continue running after him and the more willing he is to give up. Thanks to that, the chases feel more dynamic and less clunky. So, this is what the vision mechanic is, and this is where the developers deployed yet another trap. What they did was maximize the hunter's senses by setting them to the very high state in every single instance, which broke the iconic shadows on the level. When the hunters are looking for James, no matter how good you hide, they will always find him in the shadows. These places become unsafe and completely useless with this measure enabled. You might as well imagine that every single corner is lit up or something. This is how the hunters probably see them, which is a huge bummer for pirates. But it's not just corners, the whole level is probably lit up for them too. At least this is how it feels now, and this is what we tried to show by hacking and rendering it like that. Since there are no more of the other anxiety levels in the middle during chases, it made them nightmarish. Firstly, hunters spot James faster at any distance. Call it a quicker NPC reaction time if you want. Secondly, they're always very persistent to chase James down at any distance too. They won't give up as easily. It's as if they knew where James ran away to, meaning it's now more difficult to shake them off. Usually you'll end up running around in circles without seeing an end to the chase, and it's so annoying. As a result, the whole vision mechanic feels very downgraded and basic. I want to assure you that this has nothing to do with the hardcore mode and its key features. This difficulty just slightly increases the field of view for enemies in the vision mechanic, and that's it. The anti-piracy measure makes the chases harder than the hardcore difficulty itself. If this measure isn't deactivated by whoever cracked the game, then it's always enabled by default. This means that there are no time counters and no specific actions needed to trigger it. The pirate would never know that something is wrong with the stealth mechanic. At least I've never heard Steam players mentioning it, just more pure evilness. At least the pirates still have an opportunity to get rid of enemies quietly. And by that I mean to sneak up from behind and commit an execution, which is yet another iconic feature of this game. Of course, they intentionally broke this too. As soon as the pirate commits 3 executions during a play session, the game will silently increase damage taken by James by 50% from any source of harm. It doesn't matter if he gets punched or shot. The game literally enables a damage debuff, which is almost impossible to notice. I mean, who would even compare the damage before and after the measure is triggered if they don't even know that they activated it? But as we all understand, the pirate would enable it quite fast in his play sessions. Usually you'll end up doing 3 executions quite fast, considering that this is a core feature in the game. Even more interesting is how the developers hid this anti-piracy measure quite well in the code. When Firehead was investigating it, he couldn't understand what it actually does and how it affects gameplay. This is why he thinks the developers hoped for someone cracking the game to miss this measure in the code and release the game with the damage debuff, but it didn't happen. It looks like the developers enjoyed making these silly debuffs, as they made yet another one involving disappearing ammunition. To better understand this measure, let's divide firearms into 2 major groups. The first group of weapons are those which James loads 1 round at a time. That includes only 2 firearms, the revolver and the shotgun. The second group of weapons is basically the rest of the firearms using magazines. It includes, for instance, the assault rifle and even the nail gun. Since the outcome varies, let's start with the worst one, featuring the second group of aforementioned weapons. If the sum of spare bullets after reloading a gun can be divided by 7, then the spare bullet count will decrease by 2. To demonstrate this measure, let's fire off 2 rounds with the assault rifle. A normal player is left with 21 bullets in reserve, but a pirate is left with just 10. This is because 21 can be divided by 7, so the game takes all of these spare bullets and divides them by 2 to get 10.5, which they round down to 10. You don't even get half a bullet. But there's a huge catch. The booby trap is sitting in the reload function, and for some reason the game calls it around 40 freaking times during one single reload. Which means if you get another number that divides by 7, the spare ammo will be recalculated again until conditions do not meet anymore. Just look at this mess. If you get 56 bullets in reserve after you reload, you'll get 3 bullets in return, and this is an insane loss. The ammo in this case was recalculated 4 times. To understand the measure better, I made this table, where you can see when and how many times the ammo is recalculated and how many bullets the pirate loses with the measure enabled. However, despite the fact that the losses look wild, the measure is actually triggered very rarely. I mean, the number 7 is a relatively big number in the equation, meaning there's a small chance of triggering it while reloading a gun. And don't forget that the player usually has a few full clips in spare at best. In this case, their worst enemies are like 3 different numbers. The walkthrough you can see on your screen was replayed by me around 20 times behind the scenes. By randomly reloading the light handgun around 4 times in a run, I triggered this measure only 3 times. You would be surprised, but we didn't even know that the ammo can be recalculated multiple times until I noticed that the game took too much from me, and Firehead decided to dig deeper, because it contradicted the code from the measure. See, it perfectly shows how evil and sneaky these measures can be. But don't forget that there's also the first group of weapons I briefly mentioned before. In their case, every single time when the sum of spare bullets after reloading a gun can be divided by 3, 1 spare bullet will vanish, making it even less noticeable but more frequent. Let's say I fired the last bullet in a chamber having 29 in spare. After reloading a revolver, a normal player gets 23 bullets in reserve, but the pirate gets 20. This is because 27, 24, and 21 can be divided by 3. Thus, the game took 1 bullet away 3 times, and losing 3 bullets would be the worst case scenario with a revolver. Since the shotgun has more shells to fire, you can lose 4 shells per 1 full reload, so the more bullets you have to load in these guns, the more spare ammo you lose. And no, it doesn't have anything to do with the reload function I mentioned before. The game calls it once per bullet reload. And to be honest, we have no idea why those weapons act differently. Maybe it was done on purpose, but who knows. Either way, don't you find it hilarious that the developers decided to secretly steal ammo from people who pirated their game? I wonder what they were thinking back then. If the game cracker didn't get rid of this measure, then it would always be enabled by default. I guess this is what they were aiming for, but failed. Do you know what else a pirate should avoid doing in this game? Dragging items from one place to another, something you can do with both gasoline cans and fallen enemies, which many consider to be a pointless thing to do anyway. To remind you, these exact items or activities can be easily identified by this unique status icon on your screen in the bottom right-hand corner. If you see it and the game thinks that you're a pirate with this specific measure enabled, then don't pick any objects up, it's just another trap. Because as soon as you put it back on the ground, the game is tasked to stop cleaning its virtual memory. It becomes clogged and the game crashes. Just think about it. The developers coded a memory leak on purpose, something that others try to avoid at all cost. And they hid it in the camera's code to make sure that it definitely would eventually crash the game. But how can you avoid using this feature if at least 3 missions require you to utilize it? The first mission where the pirate will definitely face this crash is the 5th mission by the name of Fueled by Hate. As we established before, this is where we have to put gas in the crane, and in order to do that, you need to drag a gas can from another part of the junkyard. Sadly, this scripted scene with James throwing away the gas can initiates the memory leak too, so expect the crash very soon. However, if the pirate is quick enough, they can enter the crane and the memory clogging will stop. That's because it changes the camera mode, which doesn't leak, but as soon as you exit, it will continue to drain the memory and crash. If a pirate used someone's save game and skipped that moment, then they'll face the same issue during the 11th mission too. In the mission Mouth of Madness, the gas can is used to blow up a doorway that's been bricked up, and without it, there's no other way to break the obstacle and go further, unless you're a cheater and you know the right corner to use the glitch. As you can see, I didn't. In this very mission, don't even think of showing the Smiley's body to Starkweather. If you forgot about the measure, then watch how James throws him on the ground later in the cutscene. As funny as it looks, the game will crash seconds before you complete the level and get to save your progress. Fortunately, this exact crash can be easily avoided by just showing the Smiley's head instead. This is actually an alternative way of completing the mission, and you're rewarded by Starkweather in the future, so it's canon as well. The next time the pirate will encounter this problem is while solving a puzzle in the 13th mission, Kill the Rabbit. At one point during the mission, we encounter these closed gates which we can open by putting someone on the platform. If the pirate doesn't know about the glitch, they'll have no other choice than to push an NPC onto the platform and maybe even eliminate him there and run inside while the gates are open. But the truth is, I think it's nearly impossible to do unless you have God mode or something. If you think it's possible to lure them onto the platform, then you're wrong. The pirate will quickly realize that they stay in one place for the most part. Hats off, Rockstar. As you can see, if whoever cracked the game didn't patch this measure, the pirate would face these problems mainly in the middle of the story. And if the rumors are true, people cracking the games don't usually play them for that long. Luckily for everyone, it was fully deactivated, but that doesn't mean that the measure isn't cruel either. The next anti-piracy measure we're going to look at is a weird one. You see, every single time we change weapons by picking something else up, we create a pickup on the ground. Funny enough, the game keeps track of how many of them were created during a game session. This is something that the measure is eagerly tracking too. As soon as the pirate creates 8 pickups like that, the game enables another trap. Now, every single time an enemy drops a pickup, it'll vanish after 10 seconds on this footage that I'm showing you. As you can see, this is something that the game even warns you about by informing you that the dropped item has been marked to delete in 10 seconds. And it definitely begs the question, why would they inform you about this in such an obvious way? Under normal circumstances, such pickups stay on the ground for a while, so nothing is stopping you from picking them up later in a playthrough, which is something we all did in the past. So the developers probably thought, why should we wait for a pirate? If they want to get an item, they better get it as fast as they can. This, of course, makes them take more risks and do more stupid things, which would probably lead to them failing a mission a lot more often. I guess now it's more wise to just sacrifice these pickups. You know what's clever about this measure? You'll probably create 8 such pickups quite late in the play session, meaning there will always be a delay before you enable this measure, meaning less chances to spot it for the person cracking the game. In theory, of course. But remember how I said that it's a weird one? Well, this is because the developers slightly screwed it. First of all, it doesn't break the special dropped quest items in a light green sphere, such as the key in the mission Kill the Rabbit. No joke, it would be a perfect place to strike. After you get rid of the rabbit, the scripts activate this unskippable cutscene, which lasts more than 10 seconds. Luckily for a pirate, the key stays on the ground forever while his shotgun has already disappeared. That's a missed opportunity, Rockstar. The same thing could be said about the dropped painkillers. They don't seem to disappear either, which is a good sign unless these are not stupid mines, which can crash your game. What's more weird is that if you step on such an item and the game offers to replace it, then the despawn timer resets and it won't vanish after 10 seconds as the text warned. Makes it much easier for the pirate to save an item for later. Thanks to this oversight, it would be much harder to get stuck on the second mission, Doorway into Hell, where we have to get a crowbar and bust a padlock on a gate. Of course, it's still possible to make the crowbar disappear, but who wouldn't walk right into it to pick it up as soon as the game asked you to? The same thing can be said about the knife in the mission White Trash. It's even harder to screw the 12th mission, the one by the name of Doing Time. Since you have no red class weapon from the beginning, you pick it up automatically, so nothing will stop the pirate from completing Starkweather's task. You know what's more strange? They coded the heads to be excluded from despawn, but they did it poorly. Despite the fact that you still see the warning during the executions, the head will never vanish from the level. And you might ask, what was the point of making this strange exception, especially for a thing that should ruin an experience? The truth is, there wasn't any. According to the game's code, some pickups in this game vanish after 60 seconds, and this is where they coded an exception for the heads. Don't ask me why, but this is why they won't ever disappear from a level during a playthrough. As simple as it is, the developers just reused this chunk of the code and decreased the despawn time for a measure. So we thought maybe this weird exception was done on purpose, so we removed 2 flags from this item and made the head disappear by simply creating a pickup. Stupidly enough, we saw absolutely nothing suspicious afterwards. This item just disappeared from a level and that's it. Not sure why we tested it though. But anyway, I still don't understand why they decide to inform somebody with a pirated copy about the pickup deletion. It always shows in English, even if you play in a different language. This is because the string is stored in the executable and not in the text container. What if this hint was a debug leftover? Something like a hint for the developer that the measure is triggered to see that it really worked. Or what if it was done on purpose? Firehead thinks that by hiding this measure under the gameplay's code, it would be much harder to find and clean up from there. Or what if they were in a rush and just didn't finish the measure? Who knows? And now we're done looking at all the anti-piracy measures, which are present in the game without having SecuROM. And just to remind you, we've been looking at them separately. In reality, all of those measures are present in the game all at once, as it is in the Steam version. The developers expected that the person cracking the game would analyze the code manually and remove them one by one if noticed. So to make their life a little more miserable, Rockstar decided to implement 3 more unique measures, which are actually disabled by default in the code. The idea was that whoever cracked it would find and enable them thinking that they actually disabled them. Call them inverted measures if you like. They were meant to fool them into releasing a broken crack. The first inverted measure was sitting in the painkillers code. If enabled, and if the game sees that the painkillers do work, then it waits for a command to break them again. You would never guess, as soon as the pirate steps into the VHS pickup, the painkillers become broken again, meaning the player would experience the same issues that we discussed before. In other words, you can eat as many pills as you want until you step on a VHS tape. Isn't that hilarious? It seems like the developers tried very hard to prohibit people from using the sacred painkillers, and it's no wonder why. The second inverted measure was left in the code, which executes the text you see in the upper left-hand corner, better known as a help box. If the measure is active, as soon as the game displays a mission-related hint for you, it immediately stops cleaning the virtual memory. Once again, it becomes clogged and the game crashes when there's no free memory left to use. This inverted measure initiates the exact same memory leak we discussed before, hidden in the camera code, just triggered in a much different way that a cracker had to enable. And just to be clear, I am not talking about the ordinary hints telling you how to swap a weapon, or a warning that you've hit a save point by picking up a VHS tape. I'm talking about the mission-related hints, which is something you see quite a lot by playing the first levels of the game. This measure is so cruel that it makes them crash in the first seconds after you finally take over James's controls. And you might ask, wouldn't it be obvious to a cracker that something suddenly isn't right in their game? Well, it isn't that simple. If someone gave them a save game and they loaded a level from the scene selection screen, then they would see far less mission-related hints during their playthrough, meaning there would be a smaller chance to experience the crash and a higher possibility of releasing a broken crack. Even if whoever cracked the game does experience a crash, it would be an impossible task to debug it and find the cause. If you want to know why, be sure to read Firehead's thoughts about it. The third and last inverted measure was once again left in the beloved checkpoint system. If the measure is enabled, the game will always create a broken save point. As a result, every single time the game tries to load it, it'll crash. As obvious as it sounds, there's no point in saving it to a slot either. There's no chance for the game to load it, even if you restart the game. For the most part, you don't even need to pick up a cassette to make a broken save point. The game already creates it for you as soon as you start a level, so expect the crash if you failed and loaded it. Fortunately, if you want to avoid a crash, you can simply exit to the main menu and reload the scene. All of that means that you have only one try to complete the level, and then you might say, why even bother trying to finish it? You would be surprised, but this measure doesn't corrupt your save games made after completing the mission. This is because the developers broke very specific pieces of data in save games, something that's used only by the checkpoint system. If you want to read more about it, and also Firehead's thoughts about this measure, be sure to pause the video right now. With that being said, we have now covered all anti-piracy measures left by Rockstar in Manhunt. As Firehead told me, this time around the developers tried their best to make it nightmarish for both people cracking the game and people pirating it. The developers expected the person cracking it to analyze the code and remove these measures one by one if they noticed them manually. But even if they did, the developers made sure that it would be very hard to deactivate them, and they made everything as cryptic as possible. The developers also thought that someone cracking it would definitely make some mistakes, or miss something and release a semi-functioning game without even knowing it. For instance, someone playing a pirated version might not have the closed doors measure and broken interactive items, but they might have the damage debuff and disappearing bullets, because whoever cracked it just didn't notice them. What I'm trying to say is that it doesn't necessarily mean that you might have all these surprises. Maybe there'll be a couple, or maybe just one or two. Most of the stuff I showed can't be experienced while having other measures enabled. It's just impossible to get there unless some measures are deactivated or somehow bypassed. This is why I showed them one by one, to give you a better idea of how bad they are even separately. But was it really worth all that time and effort spent on making these measures? You might be surprised, but the answer was clearly no. That's because this technique would only stop the newcomers from cracking their game. For veteran Juarez groups, it was a piece of cake. These guys were too experienced to be fooled by some lousy crack protection and SecuROM. The game was fully cracked on the European launch day by the famous Juarez group Razor 1911. It was just 3 days after the launch in North America. No one even knew about the existence of these anti-piracy measures, as all the triggers were found and fully deactivated. And you know what's even dumber? The game was cracked in the same manner that Fairlight did with GTA Vice City. This was by emulating trigger behavior by giving an answer to the game every single time that the SecuROM wasn't tampered with, even if it isn't true at all. In other words, there was absolutely no point for the developers to waste more time and effort by making these measures worse if the crackers once again didn't do anything in their code to disable them. It's just like how there would be no point in putting multiple sophisticated locks on a gate if you can just walk around it. That's what I'm trying to say. Ironically, these anti-piracy measures pretty much wound up being made for those who would buy their game on Steam in the future. Now let's finally talk about how they managed to screw that up so badly. First, let's keep one important fact in mind. Razor 1911's crack wasn't that perfect. It didn't work on Windows Vista and higher operating systems due to newly added security measures around data execution prevention in the Windows core. But honestly, you can't blame them. At that time, Windows Vista didn't even exist until almost 3 years later. And it was specifically a problem in the crack. The disk version with SecuROM worked flawlessly on newer operating systems. Keep that in mind. Now, a few years fly by, and the Steam version officially releases on January 4th, 2008. This was about 1 year after Microsoft launched Windows Vista, and what did players notice? That this release did not work on the new operating system, which led to loads of people on Steam asking for a solution on how to make it work. Luckily for them, after some time, the fix was found. All they had to do was change one value in the executable with a hex editor, and then the game would finally launch on Vista. And now the important thing. The same fix can be applied to a crack from Razor, which already sounds suspicious. A couple more years went by, and on May 11th, 2010, a user under the name Liam AJ noticed that the Steam version of Max Payne 2 uses a crack from the Juarez group Myth, because how else can you explain the existence of their logo in the official Steam executable? Of course, the news went viral. So viral that on the second day people noticed an update which replaced the controversial executable. In other words, they were covering their tracks in using this crack, but they did it very strangely. The old executable was still left in the game, just under a different name. Now it's called Test App. As of this recording, it can still be found in the root folder. 9 days after the weird Max Payne 2 update, they suddenly released an update for Manhunt. People immediately noticed that the old tutorial on how to fix the game for Windows Vista didn't work anymore, as the hex value you needed to change was different. Luckily for them, there was no need to do it anymore, because now the game started to work on both Vista and Windows 7 right out of the box, which is a good sign, right? Well, not really. People began to complain about how it was impossible to complete the game, reporting closed doors, countless crashes, and other annoying bugs. People basically reported experiencing the game's anti-piracy measures, and Rockstar Games did absolutely nothing about it. But at least they decided to keep an old executable, too, by renaming it to Test App, and this is where the fun begins. If we open it with a hex editor, we can find the friggin' watermark from Razor 1911 in the field Time Date Stamp. RZR is their short name around the scene. Need more proof? In the encrypted area of the RAM, we can find this message from them too. Razor 1911, sharper than a blade or your money back. Which probably has something to do with their slogan, sharpening the blade since 1985. Just think about it. Rockstar Games used a freaking illegal crack for their official Steam release, which was never compatible with the newer operating systems in the first place. And we even have an answer why. This is because there was another secret signature in the code. This signature later screwed up their old cracks on the newer operating systems. If you want proof, make sure you pause the video. And to prove that even further, I installed Steam on Windows XP using a trick, and then I launched the game via the Test App executable. As you can see from this footage, it works flawlessly. Something that you can't say about the game when it's running on Vista or anything higher, where it just won't even start up. So, what do we have? As soon as someone caught Rockstar for illegal cracks in their official digital version of Max Payne 2, they suddenly decided to cover their tracks in Manhunt as well. It seems that they found an executable in their archives before applying SecuROM, then they just launched the game to see if it worked and called it a day. This is the same freaking executable as the disc version, but without the copy protection. They didn't even experience their own anti-piracy measures because they didn't even play the game for at least 5 minutes. There's no other explanation I could think of for how this could even happen. Thanks to this carelessness, legitimate players who actually spent money on the game have now been experiencing anti-piracy measures for 13 years, thinking that these are just stupid bugs caused by incompatibilities on newer operating systems. And how can you blame them? If you browse this game on Steam, you can see a warning that the game is from 2004 and that it doesn't support Windows Vista, 7, and 8, and it's likely that the same probably applies to Windows 10 and 11. You know what's even dumber? They added Windows 8 to this list after that stupid update, and for some reason it's only in English. So instead of getting rid of this warning because it became false for years, they added another operating system to the list, one that's actually supported with the new executable too. But it doesn't mean the game is issue-free. You still need community-made fixes to make it playable on modern PCs and operating systems, much like the other Rockstar classics. For instance, you can use the famous Manhunt Fixer. And here's what's funny. If you choose the Steam release, then it takes the test app executable, patches 2 bytes in it to make it run on newer operating systems, and then replaces it with the main executable. After that, the patcher puts a few crucial plugins in the root folder to fix the major issues in the game which are present in every single version. For all these years, we were fixing Razor's crack, making it bootable on newer operating systems. And hey, did I mention that Rockstar shipped the crack, having the Steam stub DRM? Even the author of this famous patcher didn't know the real story behind the Steam version and its weirdness. It was much easier to use a less broken executable, and this is what he told me directly. The community in general had no freaking clue that they were fooled by Rockstar, which is a shame. I actually started to wonder if it's possible to complete the game with anti-piracy measures enabled. Just think about it being a new speedrunning category by playing the unmodded Steam version of the game. First condition: the player has to use the out-of-bounds glitch because otherwise it's impossible to progress further. Second condition: the player can waste no more than 5 minutes on a level between checkpoints, or otherwise the next level breaks and you will lose precious time restarting the game. Third condition: it's important to save a game after completing every single level and restart the game after completing 3 levels. Fourth condition: don't do headshots, otherwise the game will disable your controls. Fifth condition: be prepared to experience crashes, but since we know how to trigger them, you can basically try to avoid them. Right now, I'm not sure about one thing. How can you complete the mission View of Innocence if you can't use the TV after switching on the electricity? The game requires you to use 2 interactive items, but in this version you can only use 1. But this is the speedrunning community we're talking about here. I would not underestimate them since they do some incredible stuff in games. The rest of it is not a problem since you can skip most of the broken things. Is it possible to make such a speedrun? Only time will tell. As always, I want to give a huge thanks to Firehead for helping out with this video. He managed to not only find these traps in the game, but also activated and explain them in detail so we could show them to you. He also managed to disable these anti-piracy measures in the Steam version of the game, so if you want to make sure that they were selling us a game filled with measures, be sure to check his GitHub. For more videos on Rockstar games, be sure to check out my channel, BadgerGoodger, right here on YouTube. And don't forget to follow Vadim and I on Twitter. This has been Badger, and I hope you have a great rest of your day out there. Peace out, everyone.